loyalty is all about being there. Day in, day out. So AAA thanks you for being there with loyalty rewards. Like when you get savings on AAA auto insurance just for being a AAA member. And when you switch to AAA auto insurance, you could save more based on how long you've been a AAA member and how long you've had your current insurance. Insurance that's not just insurance. Learn more about AAA auto insurance and loyalty rewards. Click now or visit AAA.com/insurance.
Welcome into week 6 of the NFL season. Back this week after missing last week. I was solo last week, so it was just me, but luckily we got Ron Rigney at The Real Made on Twitter back in the saddle here with me for this fine week 6 season. So Ron, Saturday morning, how are we doing?
Doing good. You know, life's got me being everything but consistent is what we preach on here. That's not good. I got to get back on the consistent train.
Sorry, you know, not everybody can be 100% consistent. We see there's very few at some positions still left, and at podcast host, there's very few that are still 100% consistent to this point. I know I have missed one of those prop bet podcasts, so I myself am not 100% consistent either. But all that matters is we're getting that clutch game this week, and once again, the Consistently Cashin podcast is a proud member of the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network, and if you want access to the Consistently Cashin article, which can be found over at BigGuyFantasySports.com and includes my FanDuel and DraftKings lineup, as well as Ron's FanDuel and DraftKings lineup, you can use promo code CC2019 for $5 off your VIP subscription, and that subscription gets you access to a ton of other great content over at BigGuyFantasySports.com. But we'll go ahead and jump right into it here, start dissecting and dismantling this week 6 slate to figure out where we can find some value and what plays we really like. So we'll start with it on a game level. And Ron, I'll let you jump in to talk about which games you are targeting first.
I think the one that when I made these lineups, the one that I see popping up the most is going to be that Cardinals or Falcons at Cardinals matchup. There seems to be a lot going on here. You got over a 50 total, so that's kind of where I start before I just kind of dive into everything else, including the consistency. You always like to see those totals when you're doing DFS above that 50-point range. And, you know, a lot of times, too, we have those totals that go to that 50-point range. They exceed that, and that's kind of what I'm thinking is going to happen here. But you've got both quarterbacks are in play here. You've got, if David Johnson plays, I think he's in there. If not, Chase Edmonds presents a little bit of value. You've got the receivers on both sides. You know, and I'm going to talk a little bit later on about a couple of those more affordable options there, including one that's my building block this week. I think we both have him as our building block at one of these spots here, and save you a little bit of money there at the spot. But that's probably the one popping up the most in the 2 lineups that I did.
Yeah, for me, obviously the easy choice here is going to be Chiefs-Texans. A lot of good options there. The lower level game that I'll give you 2. There's 2 that I actually do have some exposure to, and I'm a little worried about if I'm being honest with you. One of them, at least. The one I'm not too worried about is the Cowboys-Jets game. I like the receivers for Dallas, and then I also think you can get away, assuming with Sam Darnold plays, I'm assuming we can actually get away with Jamison Crowder over on DraftKings. He's very cheap, and if you remember the last time Crowder played with Darnold, which I believe was that week 1 game, Crowder had 14 catches on 17 targets for 99 yards, and that was against a Buffalo Bills pass defense, which is very good. So in a little bit of a better matchup, I really like what Crowder can do, and over on DraftKings, where it's at full point per reception, he's a steal at that price. And then lastly, I keep ending up with players from this Dolphins-Redskins game. I don't know how it happens, but there's a receiver for Miami who has like a 20% target share with Josh Rosen at quarterback, who's Preston Williams. However, I still think the DFS play from that team this week is going to be Devontae Parker, but I've been burned by him many times, so I'm avoiding trying to get him in there. And then from the Washington side of the football, Adrian Peterson, Terry McLaurin, I think both are great values for week 6. So those are games we're looking to get some guys in our lineups from, so we're really targeting those games. However, just like every week, there's some of those games that might be stinkers, or we just can't get anybody from those teams in our lineup, whether it be price, talent, etc. So, Ron, what games are you avoiding in Week 6?
I don't have a lot of exposure. I lost my window here. One of the ones that I'm kind of avoiding is Pittsburgh and the Chargers, just because I don't really know what to expect out of this game. I thought that, last week, Phillip Rivers, Keenan Allen really didn't do a whole heck of a lot, and they had a pretty solid matchup. Austin Eckler kind of came through if you had him in the PPR. I'm not confident in the quarterback play. I can't even remember the guy's name that's starting for Pittsburgh today, some guy that they got off the street, I think. James Conner's been a disappointment. Juju Smith-Schuster's been a disappointment. I mean, yearly league, you're rolling with these guys because you have to, but that game's only got a 41.5 point total as well. Just, I don't have a lot of exposure. I don't think I have any exposure to anybody in this. Obviously, that's not a main slate game, but if you're playing off this slate, that's one I'm not going with. For one that is on the slate that we're playing, Tennessee, Denver, not a lot of appealing options there as far as DFS. I mean, yet again, yearly guys, you might be rolling with Philip Lindsay in your flex and Emmanuel Sanders, Cortland Sutton. But to me, the only thing really appealing about this in the DFS world might be the Tennessee defense. But other than that, that one's also got a 40.5 point total. I'm staying away from that one for sure.
Yeah, for me, looking at the games here, there's only one game where I don't have a player from either team in either of my FanDuel or DraftKings lineups to date, and that's the 49ers-Rams. I know there's some value here with Malcolm Brown, with Todd Gurley likely being out. Obviously, any given week you can play Cooper Kupp and be happy. I just couldn't find a way to get those guys in. You just look at guys at various price points, and I could just tell you there's somebody that I happen to like a little better. So just how it worked out, I think that will be a good game. I do think.
Well, and looking at that game real quick too, I don't think that I think that total is really high. I don't think that 50.5 total is going to get there. I think that these are a couple of teams that can play some okay defense, especially San Francisco. I'd be shocked if it gets to that 50.5 total.
Yeah, I would too. I think that's certainly interesting. You look here at some of the injuries too, with the Rams being out to leave. That's you think, oh, that's good for the San Francisco pass offense. However, their number one receiver would be most likely a number two on most teams, and Garoppolo is content to throw it for 175 yards a game, and they'll just run it for 700. So we'll have to see what happens here. I do think the Rams actually give the 49ers their first loss this season. However, I do think that the Rams being 3-point favorites, so then you assume you get 3 at home. So basically they're saying it's a pick 'em, but I'm going to roll with the Rams winning that game. But in terms of DFS, I'm not getting much love from that game. So we'll slide away from the games aspect here, and we'll go to a little bit more granular level here, and we'll get down to the player level. So we'll go here with, as we always do, our favorite high-price guy, mid-price guy, and lower-price guy. And then we'll come in with our Week 6 building block, and then everyone's favorite segment that they talk about all week, the bold prediction for Week 6. But we'll start with our favorite high-priced guy of the week, and we'll keep the train rolling. And Ron, we'll let you go first.
High-priced option. And when you look at this matchup, your first inclination is to see who he's playing, and you're like, oh, that's a good defense, and I'm not going to start him. But when you think about just who the guy is and who he's going against, when you look at some numbers, it makes it solid. And that's Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas is going against Jacksonville this week. And when we look at what Jacksonville's done, they've been a solid defense, but they've allowed their number 12 as far as points allowed to the wide receiver position, which, is kind of middle of the road. It's not terrible, but it's definitely a lot worse than what I thought they would be. And so I think this sets up nicely for Michael Thomas. I think he's going to be there. I think he's almost kind of getting to that point where he's almost matchup proof. I don't know necessarily if I really care who the corner is across from him. Great route runner, athletic, guy, checks all the boxes as far as that. And he's the main target guy, especially, we know that Teddy Bridgewater's the guy in there at quarterback. He had 13 targets last week against Tampa. Now, Jacksonville's definitely not Tampa's secondary. I understand that. But when I'm going through all these different matchups, and it's kind of what you said as far as that Rams-Niners game, there's not a lot of high-priced guys that I really, really love this week. I find myself more in that mid-range level with a lot of these players. But I'd have to say Michael Thomas. I think he's going to get a lot of targets. I think he's going to potential to get in the end zone. But the Jacksonville pass defense has been a little bit deceiving. Yep,
absolutely. I agree with you there. And then for me, looking at the high-priced guy, I struggle with this one more than the mid-priced and low-priced options. I want to stick at wide receiver with you, but I'll go the other way here. I think the last time we were on the podcast together, I did this as well, so it's a little bit chalky here, but I'm going to go Patrick Mahomes. Yes, he's the highest-priced quarterback on the slate. However, he's playing in a game that's expected to be a shootout per Vegas. Deshaun Watson's stats are considerably better on the road than at home, so I do think they're going to score some points. I think we really could get 4 full quarters of Mahomes airing it out, and I do think at some point in this game, I do like Carlos Hyde. I think he's going to get the football because I think Houston's going to try to run the football and drain the clock so that Mahomes is on the field, less and less. However, at some point, I think Andy Reid and Bill O'Brien, whether they mutually agree at halftime, they're both going to say, listen, we're done running the football. Let's air it out and let's make it happen. And that's exactly what you want for fantasy. So I really like Deshaun Watson too. But if you do have that money to go up, for me, I think it's a foolproof, matchup-proof week for Patrick Mahomes. So a lot of options here in the mid-price range. So Ron, I'm excited to hear where you go here in this tier.
Yeah, it's a guy that you mentioned the game earlier, and of the game that you mentioned, it's the only guy that I have out of there because I really like the value on it, and that's Le'Veon Bell. And I know Le'Veon Bell from a yearly standpoint has been kind of a disappointment so far, but that whole Jets offense has been kind of a disappointment. It's been a disaster. They've had 3 guys in a quarterback. I'm a little bit more confident with Sam Darnold back this week. I think that helps Le'Veon Bell out quite a bit. I think it helps the whole offense out quite a bit. But he's sitting there at 6,800, so he's a little at the higher end of that mid-level price point. But think about all the times that you've had Le'Veon Bell in your lineup and you've paid under $7,000 for him in the past. It just doesn't happen. And so I think this is a week where things kind of set up nicely for him. Like we said, Sam Darnold is back. Dallas is allowing the 9th most points to the position. They've also allowed 6 rushing touchdowns, which is up towards the top. They've also allowed running backs to catch 37 passes, which is tied for 2nd in the league as well. So I think that Le'Veon Bell is going to carry this offense. I think he's going to get targeted in the passing game. I think he's going to get the ball quite a bit. He'll easily be above 20 touches, I think, and I think he gets in the end zone. So Le'Veon Bell is probably my favorite mid-price guy.
For me, this time I'll actually stick at the same position with you. And when you mentioned the game that you were avoiding, I was a little caught off guard because there's one guy I think who's actually a slam dunk fantasy play this week out of that game, and it's not the Tennessee defense. It's actually going to be Derrick Henry. Again, Denver's defense as a name is very good. However, as an actual team this year, they haven't been as great as one would expect, especially losing Bradley Chubb off the edge, so that's an impact player that's gone. But looking at Derrick Henry here, I believe he's 100% consistent on the season. He's had at least 15 carries in every game this season. And if you look at the numbers here, he has a touchdown in all but one game this season. That one game he didn't score, he went for 100 yards. And you look at over the last 2 weeks, he does have 20-plus carries in each of the last 2 weeks. And when you look at this Denver defense, there have been 3 opposing running backs who have had at least 15 carries against this defense. We had Josh Jacobs go for 23 carries for 85 yards and 2 scores. David Montgomery went for 18 carries for 62 yards and a touchdown. And then Leonard Fournette went for 29 carries, and he had 2,025 yards, or what it felt like, against that defense. He ran all over them. So with volume, you can run on this defense. I don't believe Denver's going to score many points against Tennessee, against their defense. Derrick Henry very well could see 30-plus carries this week, and at his price point on both sites, I'm trying very, very hard to get him in there. More so on FanDuel, just because he doesn't really do much in the receiving game, so you do lose kind of half the production there in terms of he doesn't get much in the receiving game. However, he is going to absolutely feast this weekend. We'll drop down to the low price tier here. So, Ron, where are you looking at in that lower level of price points?
Let me give you couple here. I'm going to give you one that's kind of at that higher level of the low price points, if that makes sense, and then a guy that's definitely down a little bit further. Marcus Robinson's the first one, and you talked about this game, and there's tons of guys in here to add. But if there's speculation Tyreek Hill might play if Sammy Watkins or that Tyreek Hill might play. I don't know if he really does. Sammy Watkins could be out. DeMarcus Robinson's a guy that I'm targeting because it's just kind of that last man standing mentality. I think if those two guys are out in a game that's got this high of a total, with Patrick Mahomes pulling the trigger, I think DeMarcus Robinson can return some insane value. I have him over in my DK lineup. He's 5,900 over there, so he's kind of at that lower level, if you will. And then the main low price guy that I see across the board that I think is going to generate the most value is Mohamed Sanu. And Bob and I talked about him earlier on the consistency pod earlier this week. Mohamed Sanu is 80% consistent and playing in a solid offense. And I like to, if you can maybe stack him with Matt Ryan. Julio Jones is out there obviously, but Mohamed Sanu's kind of a forgotten man in that offense, and all he's done is produce. Now he's not putting up, first round pick type numbers, but he's putting up solid numbers, and especially over DK, he's got that $4,500 price tag. I think that definitely returns some value in a game with this high of a total.
Absolutely. For me, lower price looking here. If you want to take a chance on one of those Miami receivers, I think you can get away with Preston Williams or Devontae Parker. I do expect more ownership to be on Williams. So if you want to toss out Parker in a GPP, if you do end up playing those, you certainly can. Those are two guys I really do like. And then looking past that, I'm tempted to go with Keyshawn Johnson with Arizona. I mean, you can throw on that Atlanta defense. We have seen that, last week for Houston, it was their secondary wide receiver, or their number 2, Will Fuller, that had the big day. So if you look, Arizona with Fitz being their number 1, Johnson or Kirk could feasibly have a good game against that defense as well. But those are two options that I'm looking at there. That lower price point, there's a lot of good options there. You could look at running back 2 and take a look at Carlos Hyde or Adrian Peterson. I believe David Johnson's going to play, so I don't think Chase Edmonds is going to be as valuable as everybody thinks. But then, of course, you always have Malcolm Brown and Darrell Henderson, with Todd Gurley listed as doubtful for their Week 6 contest against the San Francisco 49ers. We'll move along here. We'll get into our Week 6 building block. So it's one guy that you have a really hard time building a lineup without him in it this week. So, Ron, who is that guy for you?
Well, I think we have kind of the same guy here, so I hope I'm not stealing your guy. But, when you read our tight end article, our tight end portion of our article this week, there's not a lot there. And it's because there's not a lot to do in tight end world this week. So the guy that I built every lineup around, and I usually don't start it with my tight end, but you got to get Austin Hooper in there this week. In a game with a 50-point total going against the, by far, not even close, worst team in the league fantasy-wise against the tight end, the Arizona Cardinals. They've allowed 36 grabs, 461 yards, 6 scores. They're allowing 16 fantasy points per game to the position. Not every day you get a matchup like that, especially when he's only $6,400 as well. You're not having to pay up for those elite tight ends this year. And he's gotten it done week in and week out in an offense that's putting up points. So Austin Hooper, across the board, you're going to see him as the tight end in every single one of our lineups this week, and for good reason.
Absolutely. I fully agree with Austin Hooper. And here's the crazy thing. So we're 5 weeks through the regular season now. The Cardinals have allowed 461 yards to the tight end position. Last year, the Bills only allowed 512 all year. So we are very well at the point here where at the end of 6 weeks of the NFL season, the Cardinals this year could have already allowed more than the Bills last season. The Jets aren't too far behind. And last year as a whole, the Cardinals only allowed 594 receiving yards to the position all season. And they're already at 461. So with a big game from Hooper, which is very possible, we could be seeing the Cardinals are already past their 2018 numbers. And to build on that too, they've already allowed, I believe it's 6 touchdowns to the tight end position. Yeah, 6 touchdowns. Last year they only allowed 3, so they've already doubled that number. And their 6 touchdowns this season would actually rank in the top half of the league last season already. And we are 5 weeks into this season. So absolutely, Austin Hooper is a slam dunk play. Looking at my lineups, I feel like I'd be cheating if I didn't pick a guy who I actually did have in both. So I really want to say Derrick Henry, but the guy that I do have in both lineups is another running back, and it is Mark Ingram. Baltimore is going to run the football a lot. Lamar Jackson has taken that step back. What we saw in Week 1 was smoke and mirrors, considering he was playing a CFL defense. Maybe I don't want to say a high school defense, and I don't want to say an NFL defense. So we'll go.
That's almost insulting to CFL defenses, though.
That's true. But Jackson's taking a step back, and you can tell that Jackson knows it too because his rushing attempts have increased, and he's going to take off and start running. But here, I don't think Hollywood Brown's going to play. In fact, if he doesn't, I like it even more for Mark Ingram. You could try Gus Edwards too, I guess, but Ingram's going to get 20-plus carries. Since he should keep this game close enough that Ingram does stay in the game, Baltimore will obviously win this game. But you look at that Cincinnati injury report, they're without some key guys on the defensive line. So I don't see how Mark Ingram doesn't absolutely smash this week, making him my Week 6 building block. But now what we can do to wrap it up here is we'll go to everybody's favorite segment, the one they talk about all week, the one everyone's clamoring about, and that is our Week 6 bold prediction. So, Ron, I'll go ahead and sound the bell for you, so it's time for your Week 6 bold prediction.
So, a guy that I think we both have in our lineups as well, and you'll see in the article, it's a guy that if you were ever going to use him, this is the week to use it in the Tank Bowl as it's being billed over in Miami, which I almost thought about going to tomorrow, and then I looked, and you can get a ticket for like $21, but then I still felt like I was overpaying, so then I thought twice about it. So I'm going to stay home tomorrow and probably have to watch it on TV because it's a local game, and that's Adrian Peterson. And so Adrian Peterson tomorrow is going to score 3 touchdowns, but he's going to rush for less than 50 yards.
Whoa.
Yes.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's going to be ugly, man. It's going to be ugly.
Okay, so I certainly like that. I'll take the touchdowns. Would like to see that yardage mark be a little higher, but we'll have to roll with it. But so I just rang the bell there, so we'll go to my Week 6 bold prediction. And mine's very similar. It's going to be a running back with 3 touchdowns. However, you said less than 50 yards. I'm going north of 150 yards for Derrick Henry in this matchup. Again, I spouted all those numbers about running backs with volume against this Denver defense. It should ring true again. I'm thinking 150 yards and 3 touchdowns for Derrick Henry, and I do think he ends the week as the fantasy running back number 1. So it looks like we're pretty in tune there with a lot of our predictions and everything. One last thing here just to wrap it up. If you don't have money for like the Baltimore defense or any of those top-tier defenses, I'm looking at our lineups here, and it seems like neither of us had much money for any defenses left over. So what defenses what's the play this week? Because obviously we don't have the fantasy, RB, like QB4, RB1 that is the New England Patriots defense. So where are we going here?
Well, the one I'm going with, I think I went with in both lineups because it actually worked out salary-wise that I could do it, was the Seahawks defense. And the Seahawks defense has Cleveland this week. I look for that game to I think the total is pretty fair where it's at. But one thing that panned out for me very, very well last week was going with the San Francisco defense against Baker Mayfield. And Baker Mayfield really stunk it up. And he's obviously underperformed pretty much every week this year. He's thrown a pick in every game. He's been sacked at least once in every game, including a couple of games where he's had 3, he's had 4, he's had 5. Has not looked good. Running game's been so-so. Receivers have been so-so. I think the Seattle's going to be able to get to him. I think they're going to pick him off a little bit, but I have to look at what the price range is for Seattle. But when you come down a little bit, looking at our lineups, where they're 4,100, so they're not ultra cheap, but they're not also at the top level either. But I think they're going to make it an interesting day for Baker Mayfield for sure.
Absolutely. That for me, I'm looking at that. I'm going to go with that Saints defense. I know Minshew's a little banged up, but that Saints defense has enough talent on the other side of the ball. If they can contain Fournette, I think they should be A-okay. But we will go ahead and wrap it up here one more time. The Consistently Cashin podcast, part of BigGuyFantasySports.com, is a proud member of the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network. And if you do want to check out our full article with write-ups about a couple players at each position and our FanDuel and DraftKings lineup, you can use promo code CC2019 for $5 off your VIP subscription over at BigGuyFantasySports.com. Go ahead and tell Bob Lung that Ron and I sent you, and he'll make sure that you get access to all that great content, and you'll be able to read everything that's going on over at Big Guy Fantasy Sports, from the consistency in review articles to the prop bet content to all the other great content, including the primetime game write-ups. You'll be able to see that over at Big Guy Fantasy Sports. So we hope that you stay consistent. We wish you the best in all of your Week 6 contests, both daily and seasonal, and we look forward to seeing you in a week when Week 7 rolls around.
Hey, it's Jamie, Progressive number 1, number 2 employee. Leave a message at the... Hey, Jamie, it's me, Jamie. This is your daily pep talk. I know it's been rough going ever since people found out about your a cappella group, Mad Harmony, but you will bounce back. I mean, you're the guy always helping people find coverage options with the Name Your Price tool. It should be you giving me the pep talk. Now get out there, hit that high note, and take Mad Harmony all the way to nationals this year! Sorry, it's pitchy.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Loyalty is all about being there. Day in, day out. So AAA thanks you for being there with loyalty rewards. Like when you get savings on AAA auto insurance just for being a AAA member. And when you switch to AAA auto insurance, you could save more based on how long you've been a AAA member and how long you've had your current insurance. Insurance that's not just insurance. Learn more about AAA auto insurance and loyalty rewards. Click now or visit AAA.com/insurance.